Hey everyone, Mr. Umi here. Welcome to another episode of Tweak.Test.Repeat. In today's episode, we'll be going over the new recent game, Watch Dogs Legion. If you haven't heard of it, it's a AAA game. You can get it through EBI Soft. You can also get it through Epic Games. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and launch it here from Epic Games, and we can go over some of the settings that are in the game. Hey everyone, here's Watchdog Legions here. We're going to go ahead and go over some of the options we have in there that we can use to change the performance of the game. I'm going to click on the options menu, then video. So you'll see under video adapter I'm running an RTX 3090. That's an NVIDIA card, but certainly other cards from AMD like the Radeon 6800 or the 6800 XT or 6900 XT can run this, and obviously there's some medium and some lower range cards that can run this game as well. But for this demo, we're going to be using the maximum hardware that I think should be used or utilized to play this game with all its eye candy turned on. So the first option we have here is windowed mode. I'm going to be running in full screen. Obviously there's other options here, borderless, borderless, and windowed. That's going to enable you to give you a little bit more frames per second boost, because a lot of these games like Watch Dogs Legions, they can really have a low frame rate unless you run it at a lower windowed mode. For free, I'm going to run it at full screen because it runs perfectly well. I'm running one display. My native resolution is 5120 by 1440p, so that's a 32:9 ratio resolution. Obviously this resolution really impacts how many frames per second you can get in this game here. Some of the traditional resolutions are 1920 by 1080p. That's your HD resolution there. We also have 2560 by 1440p. But you also see some of the other wide screen resolutions here, like 3840 by 1080. But for me, I'm running 5120 by 1440. The monitor refresh rate I have set to auto. It's probably going to pick up my native refresh rate. But if you scroll through this option here, you have 60, 120, and 240. So for 60 and 120, that's probably going to depend if you're running on a gaming monitor or a traditional TV, like a 4K monitor TV. So normally those are HDMI driven. HDMI 2.0 will give you the 60 frames per second. If you have a HDMI 2.1 cable, you can achieve the 120 frames per second. If you're running this game on a console, like an Xbox Series X or a PS5, you're probably going to have some quality and some 120 frame per second modes in there. So enabling that will allow you to get our higher frames per second. So for mine, I'm going to set to auto. VSync I'm going to have off because my Samsung Odyssey G9 has a built-in G-Sync chip in there, so I don't need VSync to synchronize the frames with the graphics card. I'm going to have unlimited frames here. Field of view, that's what the person sees when they're running around. 70's default for this game. If you play games like Call of Duty, Modern Warfare, or Black Ops Cold War, or other first-person shooting games, usually I like to turn that up to maximum so that you could get that fisheye kind of look and see some of the enemies on the sides when you're playing multiplayer. But this game is largely single player, so I'm going to keep that at 70 there. Just note that if you adjust the setting, it could also decrease your performance in there unless you have some good hardware. Menu position I'll keep as auto. I only have one monitor, that's auto. And that looks like the options that we have there for that section. Now we have quality. So obviously this game is going to allow you to run in DirectX 11 or 12. Normal cards can support 12. The DirectX 12 API or DirectX 12 Ultimate is what they call it, allows you to have all the newest technologies like ray tracing, mesh shaders, all that eye candy that can actually make that game more immersive to the eye. But it also causes a performance hit. Even though DirectX 12 allows more of your CPU to be used, that's going to be more GPU boundless resolution. So CPU bound will be you're going to be using your CPU more, like 1080p. For GPU bound, you're going to be using 1440p and above. So if you're think you're having a performance hit, you can lower that down to 11. It won't use too much of that eye candy. But I'm going to leave that at 12. Here I'm running a custom graphics quality here, but some of the options are low, medium, high, very high. So that's going to affect how the game looks. Obviously, the higher you make it, the more your load you put on your CPU, the more VRAM that you have to use. And that goes for geometry, environment, texture resolution, texture filtering, shadows, headlight shadows, reflections, depth of field, motion blur. So a lot of those effects, they can actually enhance the game, but it puts a performance penalty on your card unless you have really good hardware. If you're using traditional rasterization, then this is going to have a pretty big hit on your rasterization performance unless you have a fast card. Next, if you scroll down, we have motion blur, bloom, ambient occlusion, more effects. For my card, I'm running an NVIDIA card, so it runs really well with TAA. But the biggest thing about having an RTX card is you have built-in ray tracing. So I have it set to ultra. Inside the NVIDIA cards, it has tensor cores which help with ray tracing calculations. Obviously, if you have a card that doesn't have this, or some of the newer generation AMD cards, it's not going to be as mature and it won't run as well. Not that there's a lot of games that have ray trace or reflections or full path ray tracing. A lot of games that we have right now, they're AAA. We have Call of Duty, Black Ops Cold War, we have Watch Dogs Legions, we have Cyberpunk 2077. All those games are going to have ray tracing effects or reflections and shadows. So that's going to only get better as more games get released with ray tracing. Because ray tracing puts quite a load on your graphics card. I can't speak for AMD, but NVIDIA does have what's called DLSS, Deep Learning Super Sampling. So it's going to use its tensor cores to upscale the image quality. So as an example here, I'm running 1440p. If I have enabled DLSS performance, then it's probably going to take somewhere around a 1080p image or lower, and upscale that image up to what it would look like for 1440p or above. Extra details, I'm going to leave that default, and then temporal upscaling 100% here. So that's it for those options there. Last, we have the image menu. So this kind of has to do with what type of monitor you have. Obviously, this applies to TVs as well. If you have an SDR type monitor or TV, standard options are brightness, gamma, contrast, sharpness. So that's going to help you adjust how the game looks, like the color gambit. But if you're lucky to have a TV or monitor with more of the latest technologies like high dynamic range, which my Odyssey G9 has, then you get an even wider color gambit. So that's going to affect how it looks, and that doesn't have any performance hit. So definitely, if you have it, enable it. If it looks kind of washed out, then you're probably going to want to calibrate your monitor. Windows 10 doesn't really look good when you enable the slider. So when I enable it, I immediately went to the color management, and I can show you in another video how to do that, so you can tweak your HDR brightness and contrast. So that's it for the settings. Now I'm going to run the benchmark, and let's see the impact that setting all this eye candy has on running the benchmark for this game. Go ahead and click yes. So that's it for the benchmark there. You'll notice I achieved an average frames of 71 frames per second, a max of 122 and minimum 38, with 1% lows and 0.1% lows at 56 and 47. So you notice that enabling all the eye candy like ray tracing puts a pretty big performance hit. But for those trying to hit that magical 60 frames per second, that shouldn't be a problem. For games like Call of Duty, though, my preference would probably be to leave ray tracing off and enable DLSS. So that's one great thing about having those options is being able to decouple them. That way you can decide whether you want to use a combination of rasterization and DLSS, uh, or have ray tracing and DLSS, or just run straight ray tracing off your card, which could probably put an even bigger load, but I'm sure it'll look great. So I'm going to go ahead and escape here. So that's it for the tutorial. If you like this video, go ahead and subscribe or hit the like button. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave it in the comment sections below. If you want to see some other videos, go ahead and let me know. And that's it for this tutorial. See you later.